Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles, and I hope that everybody is having a great and wonderful morning. All right? Great and wonderful. Great and wonderful. So, we're talking today about love and marriage and relationships. All right? We are starting a new book today and breaking it out in just a moment. I said that I was going to do some more Black First today, but I realized that I had a lot to introduce today. So I'm going to keep the Black First going on tomorrow. I'm going to do some Black First on tomorrow. We're going to dive into our piece on theology. And Friday, we're going to continue the cash and credit books, as well as give you a little bit of history about the black dollar, which I thought was appropriate for Friday. So that is what we have on our schedule for the rest of the week. All right. Book recommendation for relationships. I wrote about it a little bit on my personal page, but I want to make sure I share this book recommendation with everyone. The book is called 11. All right. And the subtitle really is 11 Indispensable Relationships You Can't Be Without. I've had this book probably for about a decade now, about 9 or 10 years. I got it when it first came out in 2008. And awesome book. If you want to be better at your relationships, if you want to be a better human being, if you want to understand the kinds of friends that you have around you, if you want to understand the kind of friend that you might be to others, this is a great read. You could do it for personal growth and development. You can read it for that. You can read it in a small group setting or a Sunday school setting. For those of you who do kind of like non-traditional Sunday school or empowerment classes on Sunday mornings before your service, this would be an awesome book, especially if you are trying to help people or trying to improve your own relationships and how you relate to others. All right. And what it does is it breaks up relationships and kind of talks about 11 kinds of people that you need in your life, and then it relates them to a biblical character. So the topics are: you need an editor, you need a true friend, you need a butt kicker. I have plenty of butt kickers in my life, thank God. You need a protege, and I actually really like that word as opposed to mentor. You need a protege, you need an encourager, you need a Yoda, you know, that wise person that you can go to for counsel. You need a back coverer. You need someone that other people might reject. You need a little one. You need you need some VIPs, people who are in your life regardless of whether or not they're rich or poor. And then it gives you you need a place. You need your personal, what he calls your personal Jerusalem. And then you need the Paraclete, which is the invisible 12th, which is why he calls the book 11. So it's a really great read. Again, if you're trying to improve your relationships with others, you're trying to understand the relationships that you're in, the relationships you have, and what kind of a friend that you are to others. All right. So just wanted to put that out there. All right. We're going to talk Tony Evans' Kingdom Marriage. We're going to start here today since that is the one that we are continuing. And we're going to jump into Labor of Love, which actually is going to break down the history of dating and how we came to it and how it is now. All right. But first, as I was doing my research, I was like, ooh, this is going to be good. Good morning. Good morning to everyone in our chat box. Please feel free to chime in. I do go back and read the comments. So for those of you who are commenting on Periscope, I know YouTube live stream does not save the live stream comments. I wish it did. But I do try to read them as they come up. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is 4 myths. Black marriage, 4 myths. And you can find this article on thoughtco.com. Thoughtco.com. So all I do is I just basically brought out the 4 actual myths and what are the statistics behind them. The article is much longer. All right, but let's talk about these myths because they are myths, okay? But these myths are perpetuated in one of the most powerful forms of perpetuating untruths, and that is media and movies, all right? So, black marriage, 4 myths. Myth number 1, for those of you taking notes and counting, all right? You can put it up in the chat as well. Number 1, black women don't marry. Dum da da dum. This is a myth. I know some of you might be shocked by that, but it's a myth that black women don't marry. And it's a strong myth because of all of the media centered around, many times, of course, successful single black women. But it's also perpetuated through the movies that we watch, right? Who knows the recent movie that this was perpetuated through? Came out, I think came out last year. Maybe. Anybody know? Everybody went to go see it and they were talking about pineapples or something like that, some kind of fruit or whatever, and people had, you know, inside jokes or whatever. But Girls Trip. All right? So there's this myth that black women don't marry. Here are the statistics for those of you taking notes. 75% of black women marry before the age of 35. Bing. This is good. This is actually good news for our community. The census taken between 2005 and 2009 showed that 75% of black women were married before 35. All right. In small towns, the marriage rate is actually higher. They get married at a higher rate than white women in urban cities. All right. So that's one statistic. Excuse me. All right. Number 2. Myth number 2. Educated black women have it harder. That's another myth. I know it's hard. It's going to be hard to break it out of your mind if this is what you have been taught and this is what you thought. But the myth is that educated black women have it harder. False. Black women who complete college improve their chance of marriage. Black women who complete college improve their chance of marriage. And here are the statistics. 70% of female college graduates are married by 40. 70%. While only 60% of high school female grads are married by 40. So think about that. 70% of collegiate graduate women are married by 40. If they finish high school, 60% of them are married by 40. Here's the stat on men. It's even higher. 76% of black men with a college degree are married by 40. Hats off, black males. I always believed in you. I got a whole series about you guys. Church love. See him up there? 76% of black men with a college degree are married by 40. This actually shows that education increases the likelihood of marriage for black men and black women. Get your education. I think part of that also has to do with the fact that people are, they're not waiting until they complete college. There's a small percentage in there of people who are married while they are attaining their degrees as well. Number 3, myth number 3. Rich black men marry outside of their ethnicity. Let me sip my hot pineapple juice on that. Now, let's talk about why this myth is as strong as it is. And the article actually mentions this. It talks about the fact that while celebrity athletes and celebrity entertainers are often put in the spotlight more because they marry outside of their ethnicity, the data says otherwise. All right, so it's actually a myth that most rich black men marry outside their ethnicity. Here are the actual numbers. 83% of married black men who earned at least $100,000 a year got hitched to a black woman. 83%. All right. Here's another one for you. 85% of black male graduates are married to black women. That's more than half, people. That's 85%. Here's another stat for you. 88% of black men have black wives, whether they are rich or poor, highly educated or not. All right, 88%. So when I look at some of the imagery, when I look at some of the online social media commentation and commentary that I'm seeing bantered about between black men and black women, and black women saying black men aren't caping for us, and black men saying black women aren't standing up for us and they aren't behind us, da 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 da. It's based all on a myth, guys. It's a myth. All right? Do your homework, do your research, and ask yourself, if these are the statistics, why do the visuals and why does the media portray otherwise? Do I need to read those statistics to you again? I think I do. 83% of married black men who earned at least $100,000 got hitched to black women. 85% of black male grads are married to black women. 88% of black men have black wives. Oh, and here's another one. There are more black men in college than there are in prison, but you would not know that by the media. All right. So this is why it's important to actually go to data and research as opposed to building your mindset based on what you see in film and on the news, just in general. All right. So what does that mean? That means that interracial marriage should not be held responsible for single black womanhood. All right. Last myth. Myth number 4. Black men don't earn as much as black women. Also a myth. Black men don't earn as much as black women. Here's why it's a myth. Because of the gender income gap, black men remain the breadwinners in the African American community. So in our community, most of our black men are still making more than the woman because of the gender pay gap. Hence, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and Monique controversy. All right. There is a gender pay gap. And right now in our community, black men still remain the breadwinners. All right. So those are, again, 4 Myths About Black Marriage, and you can find the whole article on thoughtco.com. So let's get back into kingdom marriage, and we have been talking about the resolve that you have to have in a marriage, and we talked about thorns. That's what Tony Evans was talking about. He was talking about thorns. He also began to talk about what happens, and one of the major reasons for divorce is actually centered around chronic illness. And I think the statistics were 75% of struggling marriages end in divorce when one partner has a chronic illness. All right, so let's continue our reading through the end of this chapter, and then we'll go into the labor of love. The second principle to apply in our marriage is to recognize that thorns are a gift. The Apostle Paul claimed, "There was given me a thorn in the flesh." 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. Paul did not stumble upon this thorn. He didn't happen upon it while walking out one day. He didn't bump into it, nor did it chase him down. This thorn, which brought him pain, was given to him by God through a messenger of Satan. Apparently, God is in the thorn-giving business after all. That's not something we hear much about in these days of the cosmic Santa Claus God, who is supposed to bless us, prosper us, and expand our borders with his favor. Though God does do those things, we must not forget that he is also interested in developing us along the way. One of the worst things that could ever happen to a person would be to arrive at his or her destiny and yet still be too spiritually immature to live it out fully. The opportunity then gets wasted or not maximized. This is why one of the most dangerous prayers you can pray for your marriage is for God to bless you. The road to blessing is often littered with lessons to be learned first and faith to be developed. These lessons strengthen your character, cultivate your virtues, and deepen your love so that when you receive God's blessings, you won't squander them because of your own uselessness as a believer. I know that uselessness may sound like a harsh word, but it's not my word, it's the Apostle Peter's. So take it up with him when you see him. Peter reminds us of many layers of our personal development that we must embrace and live out so that we won't live useless lives. Let's read 2 Peter, if you have your Bible with you, 2 Peter 1, verses 5 through 8. As 2 Peter 1, verse 5 through 8 says this, "Now for this very reason also, applying all diligence in your faith, supply moral excellence, and in your moral excellence, knowledge, and in your knowledge, self-control, and in your self-control, perseverance, and in your perseverance, godliness, and in your godliness, brotherly kindness, and in your brotherly kindness, love." Everybody wants to jump to love and they skip past brotherly kindness, but that's for another lesson. "For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they render you neither useless nor unfruitful in the true knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." When you pray that God will help you love your spouse more completely, or that your spouse will love you more deeply, remember the path that teaches and cultivates love has all of those other pieces attached to it. It includes self-control, perseverance, right? Kindness, and more. Last I checked, virtues that don't just sprout out on their own. Rather, they are developed over time and often through trial by way of thorns. This is why, as a single, it's important for you to be developing things like self-control, perseverance, brotherly kindness, because guess what? There will be days when you don't feel romantic towards your spouse, but if your relationship is founded in brotherly love in Christ, right? Your spouse is still your brother or your sister in Christ if you're both believers. So where you're not feeling that eros, or you're not feeling that romantic love, there should still be brotherly and sisterly kindness there. All right? Learning from the thorn. Learning from the thorn. And here's the thing. If we don't learn from our thorns, they're going to be with us. And some of us are going to feel them in every season of life if we don't learn from our thorns. How do you know when you are facing a thorn? Because it won't go away. This is true of things about relationships, right? Most people say, well, you know, if the relationship is going wrong, to just throw the person away. I guarantee you, you're going to meet somebody else with the exact same character traits of the person that you got rid of last year. Let me sip my hot pineapple juice on that. There are certain things that aren't going to go away. It's called being human. I know it sounds ridiculous. It might sound simple. But the fact of the matter is there are certain human traits and human qualities that you're going to run across in people that you meet. Hello. All right. There's certain traits that you're going to run across in people that you meet. So if you throw out everybody, I mean, they're not selling permanent tickets to Mars yet. If you throw out everybody from your life that you get annoyed with, right, or you get frustrated over, pretty soon you're going to look around and there's not going to be really anybody around. But the reality is you're going to come into contact with people who share human traits, human characteristics. This is why I always say humans are going to human. Flawed people are going to do flawed things. You are going to do some flawed things as much as you try not to do them. All right? As much as you strive to live a godly life, a holy life, a virtuous life, there's going to be somebody that you upset. All right? There's going to be somebody that you disappoint, especially if you are living your life and you're trying to take care of yourself. There's going to be people that pull on you for your time. Okay? There's going to be people that demand your time when you know that you need to retreat and refresh and rebuild yourself. So how are you going to handle that? All right? There are certain things about human reality. There's certain things about human nature in relationships that don't go away. So if you're dismissing people thinking that it's going to go away, you're going to get new people in your life that demonstrate the same human characteristics because they're human. I hope everybody understands that. So if we have this mentality of kicking people to the curb every time they disappoint us, rather than working through the disappointment, or rather than working through and understanding why did they disappoint me? Is it something about me that I'm expecting out of people that they cannot give me anyway, that only God can give me? All right? Are my expectations realistic? Or am I expecting people to fill a God void in me? Because if I'm expecting people to fill a God void in me, they're going to disappoint me every time. And I'm going to keep breaking off relationships. And I'm going to keep walking away. And guess what? When you develop a lifestyle, habit, and pattern of doing that, you're going to do it in your love relationship. All right? So think about that. If you make a practice of divorcing yourself from people, you're practicing divorce. You're practicing that spirit of separation. All right? So if that's you today, I want you to think about why it is that you keep dropping all your friendships the moment that somebody does something that upsets you, or they don't disagree with, or they don't agree with you. All right? In 2 Corinthians 12:8, we read, "Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me." Paul's thorn was needling him and it wouldn't quit, despite his time in prayer with the Lord. Because we tell everybody, well, if you just pray about it, it'll go away. If you just pray about it, you'll be delivered from it. If you just pray about it, you'll be healed from it. But if it's a thorn, it's going to be there in spite of prayer. So how do you know something is a thorn? Paul said, I implored the Lord that it might leave me, and it didn't go anywhere. All right? When that is the case, even in a marriage, consider instead what God may be wanting to accomplish through the issue you are facing. Far too many of us are simply trying to get rid of something that God himself gave us. God gave Paul his thorn by way of Satan because God had something he wanted to develop in Paul. He wanted Paul to learn to rely on him for his strength. If you've been praying about something in your relationship and it doesn't seem like God has been addressing your prayer, removing the issue, or providing a solution, go to him the next time you pray and ask him what he wants to teach you and your spouse through this thorn. One of the reasons God gives you a thorn is because he wants to show you something new. He wants you to see something beyond your normal comprehension, and he wouldn't easily get your attention without it. Far too many believers are satisfied with living normal lives rather than the abundant life Christ died to provide. Because of this, they spend their time complaining about their thorns and trying to cover up the pain with distractions rather than asking the Lord what he wants to teach them that will take them to their next level. And here's the thing. When someone says you're going to your next level, you need to ask them the next level of what? What is the next level that I'm going to? What is the next dimension that I'm going to? What is the next realm that I'm going to? Oftentimes that next level is your maturity. Your spiritual maturity. Things that used to get on your nerves and rattle you 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, doesn't even bother you. You don't even blink now. All right? When somebody is rude to you, you don't even blink anymore. You just say, you know what? I recognize that what's going on in you has nothing to do with me, so I'm going to keep it moving. When people gossip about you, you don't even blink, because what they're gossiping about has absolutely nothing to do with who you are as a person. So you keep it moving. All right? The Lord told me something last night. I was like, wow. About envy. All right? About envy and about jealousy and what those things are steeped in and rooted in. And I'm kind of marinating on that. But the next level is usually our spiritual maturity. The athletes on professional athletic teams didn't get there without a significant amount of pain. To develop their muscles and fine-tune their skills, they had to exercise, practice, and prepare themselves. They had to intentionally experience thorns to get them where they needed to be. Similarly, no mature believer gets there merely by wishing to be there. Growth comes through discipline, learning, and applying God's truth to life's scenarios. Maturity in your marriage will be achieved as you both seek God's wisdom about the thorns He allows you to experience rather than resenting each other for being the one delivering the lesson. Another reason God gives thorns in our marriages is to keep us from exalting ourselves. Paul said, "To keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh." Thorns remind us that we are human like everyone else. Let me say that again. Yep. Thorns remind us that we are human like everyone else. And one of the major sayings behind my series up there that God gave me is real people, real issues, God answers. What makes me different as a believer from other people? I have real issues. I'm a real person, but I go to God for my answers and God responds. All right? Sometimes he responds by speaking to my heart, my spirit man. Sometimes he responds by sending another human being along to encourage me. Sometimes he responds through the word of God as I'm reading. Okay? But we're all real people. We all have real issues, but we have God answers. That is the difference. All right? That is the difference. Now, some of us have access to God and we still don't seek him out for the answer. I don't understand that. Listen, if I'm a believer and the scripture tells me I have access to the throne of heaven for the answers that I need for my life, I'm not going to bypass the throne to go ask another human being who's struggling as much as I am for an answer that I can first seek God for on the throne. All right? So if I can seek God first, why wouldn't I seek God first if I'm a believer? I'm talking to believers now. All right? So I seek God first. And then you know the awesome thing about God, as he reminds us that we're human, sometimes when I'm in prayer, he will say, reach out to this person. They can provide some insight. All right? So, but I don't bypass God and go ask Facebook. This is what people are doing. You're asking Facebook. And I think it's funny because you ask Facebook and then you get 50 different opinions and then you get mad at 25 of those opinions, but you bypass God. I mean, come on. Let's think about what we're doing here. You didn't pray. You didn't seek God, but you asked Facebook and 50 people responded in 50 different ways. And 25 of those ways angered you. So now you're upset at the people online. All right. You've blocked of the 25. You probably blocked about 20 of them. So you've severed relationship with people because you're disappointed that they didn't give you an answer from heaven when you bypass heaven to go ask them. Ain't that a mess? But this is what we do. We're human. We're human. We're human. This is what humans do. All right. So don't bypass God. You have access to heaven. You have access to the throne. All right. You have access to the God of the universe. All right. And if the God of the universe knows who to connect you to, he will tell you. He will tell you. Well, all right. He will tell me, Shantae, you don't need to write that online. Shantae, I know you hot about what some of the stuff that you see, but you don't need to respond. I know you read that, and I know you know it was directed at you, even though it didn't use your name, but you don't need to join the conversation. All right? Sometimes we bypass the throne to go to other people, but we bypass the throne. All right? So thorns remind us that we are human. They keep us dependent on God. Our tendency without thorns is to forget our need for God. And it's also, hear me, sometimes it's to forget our need for others. Some of us who haven't experienced a thorn yet, we think we got it all together. Now, remember, I said, going to the throne of grace. But sometimes as you go to the throne, God says there are people right around you who can help you. Let me point you in the right direction. Because what often happens is in our humanity, when we bypass the throne, we go to people that God himself would have never sent us to. I know that was good right there. How do I know? Because I've done it. That's how I know. I've been transparent with people that God himself would have never sent me to. And it turned out horribly. Okay? It did. And then when I went back to God, God told me, I would have never sent you to that person. If you would have asked me, I would have told you that that person is a gossip, that that person has no personal filter. They don't even have a personal filter about their own life. They tell everything about their own life. So what would make you think that they would be able to keep your confidence when they don't have a filter for their own life? I know I just helped somebody right there. Okay? So this is why it's important when Proverbs 3 verse 5 and 6 says, acknowledge him in all your ways and he will direct your path. Acknowledge him in all your ways. Acknowledge him in every endeavor that you're getting ready to do. Acknowledge him before you walk out the door. Acknowledge him before you commit to that appointment. Acknowledge him before you get on the phone thinking that you can trust and confide in this certain person. You might want to ask God, should I be making this phone call? I know I need someone to talk to, but is this the person I'm supposed to be talking to? And when God says no, they're not in a place to hear you and keep your confidence, put the phone down. I suggest that you listen to the Lord. So, how different is your prayer life and time in God's word when you are going through a trial versus when everything seems to be sailing along smoothly? Trials and thorns drive most of us to our knees. Some of us, it drive, hello, I'll be the first to raise my hand. Some of us, it drives to our face down. Trials. God doesn't want us to forget where the source of all abundant living in our marriages really comes from. All right. So one thing I've learned in marriage is when I'm dealing with something, or I'm dealing with a concern, or I'm dealing with a frustration, I go to the throne room. I go to the throne. I sure do. And when I get to the throne room, I usually hear, it ain't him, it's you. It's not him, it's you. And this is the areas that I need you to tighten up in so that you can have a wonderful home. You want to have a great home? Thank you, Lady Barbara. Head to the throne. All right? You can quote me on that. You want to have a great home? Head to the throne. And then sometimes he'll say, take this approach. Sometimes he will say, I will deal with him. You just keep doing what you need to do on your side. You don't stop loving. You don't stop loving. You don't stop being consistent in the role that I've called you to play in your marriage. All right? So a lot of times we have to look at, are we being consistent in our God-created role before we go call out our spouse? All right? That's for those of you who are married. A third reason God allows a thorn in our lives is to address an actual or even a potential sin in us. Do you know that God is proactive about helping you to not commit sin? Do you know that God is not sitting around waiting for you to commit sin and then strike you with a lightning bolt? All right. I know that's some people's picture of God, that he's just like, that they're walking on eggshells and doing this, right? I get that. Some people grew up with that mental image because that's how they were raised. And oftentimes our image of God comes from our parental or authority figures in our life. But God is not sitting around waiting to strike you with a thunderbolt. He's just not. And many times he sent us the paraclete, the helper, to be preemptive when he sees us heading toward sin and transgression, which is going to cause us. Here's the thing about sin. All right. It not only messes with your eternal destiny, but sin causes you to miss the mark for your life. Let me give you an example. All right. This is the mark. Okay. This is the mark. This is you. All right. Every time you engage in sin, you're trying to get towards the mark. You're trying to press towards the mark. But this is what sin does on your journey. Do, 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 do. All your life. This is what sin is doing. I can't seem to. Who wants to do that for 40 years, 60 years, 80 years? I don't know. Not me. All right. So sin causes you to not make the mark. That's what sin actually means, to miss the mark, to miss the place, to miss the divine thing you're supposed to be doing with your life. So God tries to address or prevent us from committing sin, because sin causes you to miss the mark for your life's purpose. How many of us look at people who have died, even in our family, and we say, man, they really could have been X, Y, and Z. But their life was taken. Many times when we go to funerals, most of us are reading the obituary, and I think I've maybe been to 1 or 2 funerals where I actually read the obituary and said, man, this person lived their full potential out. All right? When it is my time to exit this life, I want people to say, man, she really lived her full potential. She really produced everything that she was supposed to produce. She really loved people with everything that was in her. She really valued her relationships with others. All right? So we don't want to be the people that spend our entire life missing the mark. The thorn can be, although it is not always, disciplinary in nature. Sometimes when God allows circumstances, people, or situations to stick us, it's because he wants to address something we may not have seen or been willing to repent of without the thorn. At a bare minimum, he wants to address the sin of our pride and self-sufficiency. Certain things we wouldn't see, we wouldn't change unless we had the thorn. I'm going to stop there. We're almost done with this chapter, but I do want to get into our new book today and introduce it. Labor of Love, The Invention of Dating. Hopefully by the time we're through, you will have a better understanding of the culture and the nature of dating. And hopefully it will put a lens on it in such a way that will help you understand that dating was not really intended for the believer. All right? So we're sometimes asking systems to do for us what they were never intended to do. Okay? So let's roll. Dates. The con was up or about to be. That was what it felt like in my mid-20s. I was not sure who I had been fooling or why, or how exactly I was going to slip up and get caught. The self-help books and my Irish Catholic mother said it was the drumbeat of imminent spinsterhood I heard approaching. I did not want a lonesome, loveless future. Who does? But the dread I felt was not about that. I was starting to realize that I did not know how to want. The first sign came one swampy New York evening early in the summer. I was 26. I was walking around Chelsea with a man I had been seeing, and like actors in a romantic comedy, we ended up on the High Line. Surrounded by tourists and millionaires, we watched the sun sink into Hoboken, New Jersey. He was older, handsome, and, I thought, maybe a genius. Also selfish in a way that was much more destructive for being unintentional. For weeks, he had been trying to break off our thing in order to commit to another long-standing thing with an XX he had started to call his girlfriend again, and then changing his mind. He wanted to keep us both apprised of his thought process. He was saying something about the ideologically suspect qualities of long-term romantic love when a question I had been avoiding caught up with me. Its footsteps quickened. What should I want? At the time, I felt miserably torn between my awareness of what a cliche the maybe genius and I were, and my equally acute awareness that knowing cliches were cliches could not protect me. He was breaking my heart. But like many women, I had been well trained to focus on what other people might want, if not to make them happy, then at least to make myself desirable. Selah. So even my feelings came with shoulds in front of them. Should had become a reflex. What should I want? I asked the maybe genius later as he walked me back toward the subway. I was trying not to sound too anything, and it must have worked because he laughed. Doesn't everyone just want to be happy? I winced. It was not just that he was brushing me off, probably so he could go spend the rest of his night with his ex-girlfriend. It was that it was such a blah answer, a banal answer. Did he not have any better information than I did? He was so confident that he had a right to want, even when he wanted to be indecisive. I wanted to want, but what? Why was I always asking some man? I had learned to do it by dating, I say. I could mean any one of many women I know. I belong to a generation that grew up hearing that we girls could do anything. Yet in many ways, we grew up dispossessed of our own desires. In school, our textbooks told us that feminism was something that had already happened. If we worked hard, we could now aspire to the same things that our male classmates did. Dating trained us in how to be if we wanted to be wanted. Since we were children, we had heard that romantic love would be the most important thing that ever happened to us. Love was like a final grade. Whatever else we accomplished would be meaningless without it. We knew that we were supposed to find love by dating. But beyond that, there were no clear rules. Nobody even seemed to know what dating was. As grown-ups, most of my friends agreed that dating felt like experimental theater. You and a partner show up every night with different conflicting scripts. You did your best. Those of us who were women looking for men were flooded with information about how we should go about it. Books and movies, TV shows and magazines, blog posts and advertisements all told us how to act. Pink covers and curly scripts, and the fact that these instructions came stuck between perfume samples clearly announced that they were trivial. Come on. Pink curlicues and perfume. Dating is not serious. But what could be more serious than the activity you are told is your one way to fulfillment, and the main way your society will reproduce itself. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a conspiracy. Here is how to be if you want to be loved, the advice said, which is to say, if you want to be worth anything. Now, don't ask any questions. Female desire is not a trivial subject, and neither is happiness. As I recognized how many of assumptions about what I should want and how I should act had come from dating, I realized that I wanted to find out where dating itself came from. To do this, it would not be enough to survey the present. The welter of beliefs that friends and I held had accumulated over decades, if not centuries, so I set out to investigate the past. My first Google search yielded some bad news. Dating was dead. On January 11, 2013, the New York Times confirmed it. The end of courtship? ? A headline asked. Citing conversations with 20 and 30-something women from several East Coast cities, the paper of record announced that hookups and hangouts had replaced the ritual of the date. The word date should almost be stricken from the dictionary, one source exclaimed. The author posed a series of questions that he seemed to imagine any single girl longed to hear. Then he shot them down. Dinner at a romantic new bistro? Forget it. A fancy dinner? You're lucky to get a drink. Nobody dates anymore. Parents who have children in high school or college often protest when I tell them that I am writing a book about dating. Meanwhile, countless singles across America sign up for online matchmaking services every day. At restaurants across the country, pairs of strangers meet every night, each earnestly hoping that the other might be the one, or at least someone to make a life with. Brimming with information they have gleaned about each other, two people sit down. They start a little stiffly by asking questions. Are they doing it right? One person laughs too loud. First online dates, my friend rolls her eyes. You can always tell. She has been working as a waitress since losing a job in PR, and she sees dozens of such daters every week. She can tell an OkCupid from a Match.com meetup. She says that subtle differences distinguish the daters from those they meet on Hinge. So, if dating is dead, the owners of the apps and restaurants must say, "Long live dating." Have reports of the death of dating been greatly exaggerated? All human societies and many animal ones have always had courtship rituals. They have not all had dating. The male blue-footed booby does a mean mating dance, but he does not date. Neither did Americans until around 1900, which is what I also discovered in my research on dating. So dating, believe it or not, is a fairly new concept. Since then, experts have constantly declared that dating was dead or dying. The reason is simple. The ways people date change the economy. You could even say dating is the form of courtship, is the form that courtship takes in a society where it takes place in a free market. The story of dating began when women left their homes and the homes of others where they had toiled as slaves and maids and moved to cities where they took jobs that let them mix with men. Previously, there had been no way for young people to meet unsupervised, and anyone you did run into in your village was likely to be someone you already knew. So, I don't have my board here. Number one, the premise of dating started because women left their homes and began to work in mixed company. That's how dating started. Secondly, all right, there had been no way for young people to meet unsupervised. I wonder why that might be. Anybody have a clue? Anybody? Why you might not want the young lady to meet unsupervised? I'm going to tell you, I am the product. I am sitting here today because my mother and my father met unsupervised. They never married, but they sure did meet unsupervised. All right? So, previously there had been no way for young people to meet unsupervised, and anyone you ran into, you already knew. Think what a big deal it is when one new single shows up in a Jane Austen novel. Then think how many men a sales girl who worked at Lord & Taylor in the 1910s would meet every day. You start to appreciate the sense of possibility that going to work in big cities inspired. The ways people work have always shaped the ways that they date. Somebody needs to write that down. The way people work has shaped the ways they date. I'll pick you up at 6 made sense at a time when most people had jobs with fixed hours, like 9 to 5. Today, a text asking you up may be asking basically the same thing. But dating is not only influenced by work. Dating is work. Some of that work is physical. Take all of the things that magazines suggest a straight woman must do to be baseline dateable. Hashtag that. baseline dateable. Shop for attractive clothes, which takes work and costs money. Exercise to fit into them, which takes work and might cost a gym membership. Eat well, which takes money because healthy food is priced a little bit higher than junk food. And stay well groomed. Nails polished, everywhere waxed, face beat or face made up, however you say it, hair styled, etc. Work at a job to earn the money to pay for it. All daters are advised to make and monitor online dating profiles and maintain winning social media presences. Their efforts do not end there. The work of dating is not only physical, it is emotional. My old roommate Travis used to refer to his first date routine as the Travis Show. He would punctuate this with an ironic flutter of jazz hands, but it does take work to perform the version of yourself who might charm a stranger. Remember, when you go on a date, you are meeting that person's representative. You have not yet met them. The hardest part can be making that work seem effortless. The fact that dating is work is not necessarily a bad thing. Labor is how we shape the world around us. Desire is the chance each of us gets at birth to bind ourselves with others and make our shared world new. Most writing about dating only addresses certain people, straight, white, middle-class kids, or college graduates who live in cities. Because I want to investigate dating culture, which is produced for and marketed to such people, I will talk a lot about them too. But I will also try to show how their stories intersect with everyone else's. Attraction and affection can leap across lines set by identity. Over the past century, dating has given people freedoms. Daters have gone out and fought for their rights to look for love that is interracial, straight, gay, both, neither, monogamous, polyamorous, without risking criminal prosecution. It has become impossible to imagine doing so without fear. There is no better life than a life spent laboring at love, exerting effort not because we have to, but because we believe that what we're bringing into being is valuable and we want it to exist. Yet because our culture tends to misunderstand the nature of labor and of love, we undervalue both. If marriage is the long-term contract that many daters still hope to land, dating itself often feels like the worst, most precarious form of contemporary labor, an unpaid internship. You cannot be sure where things are heading, but you try to gain experience. If you look sharp, you might get a free lunch. All right. So that is the introduction of Labor of Love, and chapter 1 ought to be interesting. All right. The way people work shapes the way people date. All right. Chapter 1, when we come back next week, is going to be on tricks. This ought to be interesting. All right. So I want to thank you for your time and attention today. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. I hope that you learned something today. And I hope that the next time you hear one of those myths, myth number 1, black women don't marry. Myth number 2, educated black women have it harder. Myth number 3, rich black men marry outside their ethnicity. And myth number 4, black men don't earn as much as black women. I hope that you will correct the people that are saying it. All right. Knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is kinetic power. All right. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. A part of light is illumination. A part of illumination is decolonizing your mind. All right. And learning to think better based on actual factual data. All right. So light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please make sure you go out today and be light. Thank you again so much for your time and attention. Share this broadcast with a single or a married person. I guarantee you somebody needs to hear what was said today. All right. Take care and God bless. And I want to thank you for joining us on our YouTube live stream. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel or share this broadcast with a single or married person. Take care and God bless.